73%. That's the share of adults between 25 and 35 who report chronic overthinking as a daily feature of their lives. Not an occasional visit, not a rough week, a feature. Something that shows up every single day, reliably, predictably, exhaustingly. And the number one trigger for that overthinking isn't money, isn't work, isn't health. It's other people. A conversation, a meeting, a text that got a thumbs up when you were expecting a sentence. Other people. The smallest unit of human connection is apparently the most complicated thing many of us navigate. So here's what I want to talk about today, because the research on what's actually happening inside an overthinking brain is genuinely kinder than the story most overthinkers tell themselves. You said something in a meeting this morning. It was reasonable. You meant it well. The words came out more or less as intended. And then the meeting ended. People filed out. Someone refilled their coffee. The day moved forward. But you didn't. You're still in that room, not physically, but some part of you is running the tape back. The exact words you used, the way that one colleague glanced away, whether your voice had an odd edge, whether the silence that followed was normal meeting silence or the specific kind that means something. Psychologists have a name for this: post-event rumination. And a 2024 meta-analysis from the Yale Child Study Center, covering 35 separate studies, found something important. This isn't a character flaw. It's a maintaining mechanism, a pattern the brain has learned to run for reasons that actually make sense once you understand them. Here's where it gets interesting. In the year 2000, Thomas Gilovich at Cornell published a study called the spotlight effect. The finding? People consistently, systematically overestimate how much other people are noticing them. The experiment. Participants had to walk into a room wearing a slightly embarrassing T-shirt. They predicted roughly half the room would notice. The actual number? About a quarter. Your colleagues in that meeting have their own tape running, their own loop. The thing they said that felt off, the email they haven't sent, the thought they were having while you were talking that had nothing to do with you at all. The spotlight feels blinding, but it's mostly in your head. Now layer in what's happened to social interaction over the past 15 years. The text you sent at 11 p.m. that's been read, you can see it's been read, but not replied to. The message that got a thumbs up. The caption you deleted and rewrote 4 times before posting, then spent 2 hours second-guessing. Digital communication removed the things your brain relies on most: tone of voice, facial expression, the bodily sense of someone with you. What it left is pure text, floating in ambiguity, available for interpretation 24 hours a day. Research published in Psychology Today in 2026 named this message anxiety, a social cognitive pattern specific to digital communication. Not quite traditional social anxiety, but sharing its core architecture. Ambiguity, no non-verbal cues, fear of misinterpretation. And it's landing hardest on the generations who grew up inside it. A 2025 report from Montclair State University found that over 60% of Gen Z individuals have received a formal medical diagnosis for anxiety. Between 2019 and 2023, anxiety among US adults aged 18 to 29 nearly tripled, from 8% to 22%, in 4 years. The point isn't to alarm. The point is this: there is a context in which you learned to overthink. It isn't a personal failing. It's a reasonable response to an environment that has made social interaction more legible and, paradoxically, more unreadable than at any point in human history. Your brain has a default setting. When you stop doing something, when the meeting ends, when you put the phone down, a network of regions called the default mode network activates. It reviews, it consolidates, it files. And for people whose social antenna is already highly tuned, this network spends a lot of its filing time on interactions. Here's what makes this useful to know. Neurofeedback research published in 2025 found that regulating default mode network activity can reduce ruminative thought patterns by an estimated 30 to 40%. The pattern has a neurological signature. There are identifiable patterns in the brain that correspond to the tape you keep replaying. That doesn't mean you're stuck with it, but it does mean you're not imagining it. Now, here's the reframe that I think changes everything. Overthinking is, at its core, an act of care. Think about who overthinks. It's almost never the person who doesn't care what others think. It's almost never the person who breezes through a party unconcerned by how they land. The overthinker is, almost definitionally, someone for whom other people matter deeply. You paid attention to the shift in the room. You remembered what they said last time. You wanted the interaction to go well, not for ego, but because connection is something you take seriously. John Acuff in Soundtracks puts it plainly. Overthinking isn't a personality trait. It's the sneakiest form of fear. And what that fear is guarding is usually something real. A relationship that matters, a desire to be understood, an investment in the person you were talking to. The difficulty is that fear, left alone, doesn't protect what it's guarding. It just makes the guarding exhausting. A 2021 study covering 10,000 participants found that 73% of overthinkers said their overthinking made them feel inadequate, and 52% said it left them feeling drained. Not clearer, not safer, drained. The mechanism costs more than it saves. Here's the paradox at the center of all of this. The overthinker believes that if they review the interaction carefully enough, they'll find the flaw, fix it, avoid it next time. The rumination feels like problem solving. It feels like the responsible thing to do. But the Yale meta-analysis found that post-event rumination doesn't reduce social anxiety over time. It maintains it. The review loop doesn't produce a corrected version of events. It produces a slightly worse one, more distorted, more colored by self-criticism, that then becomes the emotional record you carry into the next interaction. A 2024 systematic review from the University of Sydney, covering 1,432 participants across 25 studies, found something encouraging. Targeted CBT interventions addressing this specific loop produce large treatment effect sizes. The pattern responds. It isn't fixed. The tape can be interrupted. The meeting is over. You said something. It landed as it landed. Your colleague glanced away, or didn't, and the silence that followed was ordinary meeting silence. Or, if it wasn't, it's been processed and filed by everyone else in the room, who have their own tapes, their own loops, their own 11 p.m. reviews of things they can no longer change. The fact that you're still in the review means you cared. You showed up with something at stake, a desire to be understood, to connect, to get it right. That's not a flaw. That's not evidence of something broken. That's a person who takes other people seriously. The research, from Yale, from the University of Sydney, from decades of work on rumination, doesn't frame the overthinker as someone to fix. It frames the pattern as something worth understanding. And there's a considerable difference between those two things. The loop keeps running because something real is at its center. Actually, it never wasn't.